We're going to ask Mr. David Ferris from the Louisiana Attorney General's office if he would come forward. He provided a plethora of information last time.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So just introduce yourself again for the record.
Absolutely. My name is David Ferris. I'm a supervisory special agent with the Louisiana Bureau of Investigations. I supervise the Cyber Crimes Unit, and I'm the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force Commander.
And so I've learned so much from you that I'm telling everybody that I know that, look, hey, you need to be supervising your children when it comes to the internet. And this guy right here is an expert, and we need to have him talk to as many families as possible. So I know that you heard the testimony from DOC. Is there anything that you had that you wanted to add, or things that you may be of concern? Or?
Not specifically in reference to their testimony. I think we ended last session talking about more of a global approach to preventing the sex offenses against juveniles or against minors. Mm-hmm. After our last session, I went back and I compiled our numbers as well. So we received, what I mentioned was about 6,000. It was actually 6,128 reports last year. So that breaks down into a little over 1,000 reports per agent I have investigating. And so that is a little over a 30% increase from last year. If we stay on the same trend path we're looking at, then I'm estimating we'll be somewhere around 8,000 reports this year.
Wow. So for this year, and you may not be prepared to answer that question, but so for this year, are you guys kind of trending higher?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, so we've been trending higher since about 2009. We're sitting at about a 3,000% increase since 2009 when this project's inception was created, and since about 2019, we're at about 100% increase of reports coming into us.
So I know one of the things that we heard from you, you only have 6 agents?
So my unit is broken down with myself supervising the investigative side of the unit. I have 2 supervisory special agents. One handles one half of the state, one supervises the second half of the state. And under each of them, I have 3 agents that will handle actually the caseload of what's occurring. We also were lucky enough to have 1 East Baton Rouge Sheriff's deputy assigned to us full-time just to handle the East Baton Rouge Parish.
Wow.
So that's an incredible benefit, because just her caseload alone in East Baton Rouge is about 300 cases a year.
So we definitely know that for you guys, funding is the issue as it relates to being able to do more. Because I remember you saying that right now you guys are just taking some of the most egregious cases because you just don't have the bandwidth.
Absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, it's not humanly possible to work 1,000 cases per agent per year. And so you're really having to look at what are the biggest cases that you're going to have the best chance at rescuing a child or saving that child, or the best chance of putting a true offender away. A lot of this, I don't want to say white noise, a lot of the case noise that's coming in is things like we have juvenile offenders that are either posting images and videos of themselves or of their girlfriend, boyfriend, things like that, which still reaches the level of a crime, but doesn't necessarily reach the level of something that we have the ability to investigate at this moment.
And so in those cases, are you guys able to maybe send out, I'm going to say like maybe some kind of notice to say, hey, this is improper behavior, or send something to the parents and say your child is doing X, Y, Z. So I would encourage you to make sure that they don't do that
Yes,
anymore.
ma'am. So in every one of those cases, we attempt to contact at bare minimum the local law enforcement agency and have them reach out to the parents in person.
Okay.
If that is not available, we will reach out to the parents, hopefully across the phone or some manner like that, at least making the parents aware of what behavior is occurring.
Okay. So again, my goal initially was I want to do physical castration. And so I've learned so much more in terms of just the complexity of the matter of the issue. It's so layered at so many different junctures. And I feel like we're not prepared to even go forth with any type of legislation other than perhaps trying to make sure that we put more money in the budget. It's the only thing that I kind of see at this point. But is there anything that you see in terms of like low-hanging fruit that we could possibly do that
I think-
maybe
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you, man. Go ahead.
that we could possibly do to make things a little better?
Yes, ma'am. So I think we need to, and I mentioned this last time, we need to take a twofold approach to this. It's a trust but verify with the offender side of it. We need to really empower the guys who are supervising them and what resources they have to ensure that the proper treatment's given. But then on the front end, the more we can provide education to the children, to the parents about what behavior, how to prevent that crime from occurring, the less cases we're going to be having on the back end. Unfortunately, there's no way of me giving any real true number as to, we spoke to, prior to COVID, we were speaking to about 250,000 kids a year in different school settings and church settings, basically just preventative type presentation, dangers and digital citizenship, kind of an appropriate behaviors online. I can't even begin to say how many cases that prevented or didn't prevent, because that's a number that really can't be drawn out. We are hoping that really changed the course of and emboldened some of these kids to have the ability to say no or to not act in a manner which creates more of a victim situation for them.
So prevention on the front end, trust but verify, and giving the parole officers or those individuals who are doing the supervision the tools. And so when you say that, or is there something in particular that you have in mind when you say tools?
Well, unfortunately, this is a statement that is not going to surprise anybody, but every agency we work with, as much as they want to dedicate resources to this, we are running into situations of, I just don't have the manpower. The actual sheriff's office doesn't matter, but we spoke to a sheriff a couple of days ago, or a major from a sheriff's office, and his response basically was, I would love to send my people out to assist you guys on these cases, but I'm down by 4 detectives. I just don't have the ability to proactively work these cases or to take on additional caseload. We're drowning with what we currently have. And so unfortunately, that's an across-the-board law enforcement response is we see all the problems, it's just there's not the resources to attack all the problems. And so these sex crimes and especially child exploitation crimes, they really tend to take a back burner, because what ends up happening is a murder occurs and you see the body and people are screaming to have that murder solved. When child abuse or sexual abuse occurs, the likelihood of it being reported is slim to begin with. And then when it does get reported, unless we are proactively attacking that, unless it does get reported, once it does, I should say, it could be weeks or months down the road and evidence of that case is very possibly gone, making that case even more difficult to solve. And so this is really a crime that I don't want to say takes a back burner by any stretch of the imagination, because this is very much a priority for all of law enforcement. It's just one of those things where when you are forced to decide where you're going to allocate your resources to, a lot of times the agencies will allocate the resources to the glaring problem of the body in the street rather than the unknown crime that they haven't been told about yet.
So for your department, because I heard you say that you guys go and speak, and I'm wondering, how are y'all speaking and still working the cases? So you're working 24/7. For your office, what would be, I guess, like an ideal number to really be able to beef up your abilities to do more?
That's a very difficult question. We absolutely need additional resources, but when I make this statement, this is not a statement that I want to say this is the exact number, because I could take 10 new agents and I could keep them busy every day. I could take 20 new agents and it would keep them as busy as you want them to be. So any additional step increase as far as personnel, as far as training and equipment goes, would definitely...
Tell me a little bit more about the training and equipment.
Absolutely. So with cyber crimes especially, it is not necessarily something that I can take a homicide detective or a narcotics detective, put them in the next day, and have them being effective in that role yet, because they just don't understand the technology and how these investigations work. So to really get your feet underneath you as a cyber investigator, it's going to take you at least 6 months of just in the field training, working with these other agents before you're comfortable working your own caseload. By the time you are up and running, you've probably attended a number of different trainings, a number of different search warrants. And then in addition to that, there's an enormous amount of resources being dedicated to those individuals just on the training side of it. On average, this is just a quick estimation. Very easily, about $50,000 to $80,000 worth of training is put into about every one of our agents. Not to mention the fact that the equipment is so specialized that it is not a. I can't just take an iPad or a Dell laptop off the shelf and utilize that for the forensics that we're conducting. These machines are incredibly complex and incredibly expensive to run that unit just based on the equipment alone. Now, we do receive some funding. Our unit does receive some funding from the Office of Juvenile Justice, the Federal Office of Juvenile Justice, and what's the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. So that funding, though, has not increased in years. Oh, I say that. It has not increased to keep up with the increases of technology and in software alone. So our forensic lab, for instance, so we have a digital forensic lab that handles everything that you could possibly think of. They primarily focus on child exploitation, but they're also working homicides. They're also working narcotics cases. They're also working, like we have one of our agents that specializes in DVRs and video enhancement and things like that. So we'll get cases where it's an internal investigation about evidence that turned up missing, where they'll provide us that DVR and we'll be conducting forensics on that DVR. The software alone to run that per year averages about $200,000 per year just in software licensing alone. The issue then becomes we have about a little over $300,000 a year Internet Crimes Against Children grant to fund the entire unit. So after you're paying for software, you're left with about $100,000 for vehicles, for fuel, for hotels, for training, for equipment, for anything else that you might need. And that gets stretched very quickly.
I can imagine. Okay, well, that's good to know. And this is something that I'm making a notation about because that may be something that, at least for this year, I think we may be able to do something about that because that's a one-time. I say one time, but it's not something that you need every year. I mean, You need to kind of keep up and keep updating the information, but it's not something you need to do every year. So when you buy some of that software, does it come with, because sometimes you can buy the software and it automatically updates?
Unfortunately, no, ma'am. That $200,000 is a yearly subscription cost.
Oh.
That $200,000 I mentioned is a yearly subscription cost. So, for instance,
Okay.
one piece of software that we utilize, and this is also part of the complex nature we deal with, technology is changing so much that the technology is always having to advance to keep up with that technology. The software is having to advance. So just for instance, one major tool we utilize allows us to bypass like iPhone and Android passwords to get in and conduct forensics on those. The invoice they sent me for the 3 pieces that we have for our 3 forensic labs was $102,000 for 3 licenses for that software. I had to reach back out to them and say, this is just completely unreasonable. I can't afford this. And we dropped it down. So we essentially went from having to drop down what resources we can now provide outside agencies and the amount of resources we have because the cost was just too high. And so we had to lower the capabilities of that software in order to be able to afford what we were able to afford.
Wow. Okay. So, trying to end here somewhere on a positive note. Is there anything else that you would like to perhaps add? Because at this point, again, I don't see us being able to kind of move forward with any kind of legislation because everything just threw me completely off from what my initial goal was after I learned so much. And there were so many gaps, so many loopholes, and so many things that I thought that it would not be really prudent to do so. And I'm sure that bringing it forward before my colleagues, I would have had all those questions that I really could not answer. Is there anything that you would add or suggest as we're looking to continue the task force for the upcoming session? Because what I believe I will do is I will do a continuation because what's going to happen now is we will pause while we're in session, so we will not have any more hearings on this particular subject matter until after session is over with. But at that time, there seems to be probably pieces and parts that I left out that I may need to make sure that we include, so that when we are studying and looking at how we deter sexual offenses against children, that we are beginning to look at everything. And one thing that I don't think I have in my study resolution is the educational component, and what does that really look like? How do we ensure that maybe in classrooms, right, which I am very reluctant to say this because our teachers are already tasked with doing so much, but how do we provide the venues? What does that look like? Is there some kind of curriculum currently available? And I'm just asking you this, and you may not know the answer, that we can utilize. And so, because maybe on the front end, and like you said, we don't know how many cases this would actually deter, but we know it's going to deter some.
Sure.
What can we begin to do, and what do I need to add to the resolution that may not be in there now?
So I am a big proponent. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, so I will steal, beg, borrow from all the smarter people than me. There's no purpose in me reinventing the wheel, but NetSmarts, which is a component of NCMEC. NCMEC is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Essentially, they're the 911 for the internet. They are a congressionally ordained clearinghouse for all reports of child exploitation online. So all the internet service providers report that information to NCMEC or to the National Center, and then it filters down to the appropriate law enforcement. You're probably most familiar with their work if you've ever walked into a Walmart and you look at the exit sign right next to the wall, you'll see all the missing children's posters. That is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So they have a large component of not only the missing, but the exploited, the human trafficking, the online child exploitation. So they do quite a bit. But one of their big components is education as well. And so their page is NetSmarts. It's smarts, but the end is spelled with a Z instead of an S. They have curriculums there for parents, for teachers, for schools, for law enforcement, for every different age that's available, as well as things like interactive games, interactive activities for children. And so there's a lot of resources already out there. In addition, the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force has an outreach component as well, to where that is part of our national strategy, is putting together this education for law enforcement or for teachers or for parents or whatever that may be.
You just said something that really triggered in my mind, because I had the opportunity, what's today? Maybe this was last week. I went on campus of Southern University, and they just started the EA Sports program there. And when you say games, I wonder if that's something, I don't know if it is or not, but I wonder if they can make that a part of the gaming system. Like, so many kids play on all this stuff, that I wonder if that can be something that's added. And I don't know if it is. I don't know if you do either. Even if it's like commercials or something that in the middle of the intermission of their games, if there's something that could come on that kind of tells them about exploitation. I don't know if that's happening or not, but I'm just
I'm not
thinking.
aware of it happening, but that's definitely something I would love to see. I don't know, as a private entity, if EA Sports would be interested in entertaining that, but that's definitely something that could be pursued.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Anybody have any other questions? I think I've asked a whole lot.
So
Anything else you want to add? This is very helpful, though.
You mentioned that you were trying to end on a better note. So I will say this, though, the trends are going in the right direction. We are starting to see, especially online, we're starting to see, we don't give kids enough credit, unfortunately. But we're seeing the trends of kids stepping away from social media, stepping away from this online presence, because it's toxic. And these kids are even identifying the fact that this is becoming something. Why would they go online and pretend to be this person that they're really not? And they see their friends doing it, only to be bullied by 6,000 people they've never met. And so now a lot of these kids are really stepping back from that and saying, there's just no value added to that, so I'm going to keep my circle much smaller. And so we are starting to see really the kids growing up and understanding what some of the dangers are, just because they've been immersed in it. and realizing what benefits and negative effects they could have.
But that is very encouraging. And that is truly, really a good way and a good note maybe to end if we don't have anything else. Are there any questions that you have since we had DOC here before they depart?
No, ma'am, but I did speak with Dr. Turner last night. Dr. Turner said he'd
Okay.
be more than happy, he would love to be a part of the conversation. Unfortunately, he had 2 assessments he was doing today
Okay.
and wasn't able to drive in.
Okay, so going forward, we'll make sure that we include that. But also, I think we need to look at what's happening on the national level, and we're going to include that too for our next resolution as well. Okay, so seeing that we have no questions from any of our panelists, we thank you so very much for
Thank you,
being
ma'am.
with us today.
My pleasure.
And if you could just hang around for just a few minutes, I don't think we'll be much longer.
Yes, ma'am.